Imagine you're a small business owner in Ohio. You wake up, you check your status, and suddenly find you've been completely locked out of the federal ecosystem.
Yeah, just frozen out overnight.
Right. You are one of over, 27,000 businesses swept up in this massive $1.1 billion suspected fraud dragnet.
It's just an unprecedented, sweeping action, to be honest. The government is essentially attempting to hunt down the dark underbelly of what's estimated to be a $200 billion nationwide COVID-19 relief fraud crisis.
Welcome to the debate.
Welcome.
Today, we're digging into the U.S. Small Business Administration's massive pandemic loan fraud crackdown.
And we're looking at a pretty central question here. Does this aggressive, multi-agency sweep represent a genuine triumph of modern data sharing and accountability?
Or, is it just a chaotic pay-and-chase cover-up for a system that is fundamentally broken by administrative incompetence? If you enjoy content like this, please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications so you'll always know when new content is released. As a quick update, we continue to monitor the Martin Stevens v. OpenAI matter. It is important to note that this is still not a lawsuit. We remain in a voluntary quiet period at the request of Martin Stevens to allow time for any potential developments behind the scenes. At the time of this recording, we do not know whether any progress has been made. No settlement discussions or negotiations have been publicly confirmed. We could also report that the dead man switch has not been activated, meaning Martin Stevens remains safe from both a physical and legal standpoint. We will provide updates if circumstances change. All right, getting back to the SBA's billion-dollar fraud fallout.
Looking at this massive dragnet, I see a system that is finally correcting itself.
Yes. Look, obviously the initial emergency rollout of the COVID-19 relief was chaotic. But this current crackdown, which is fueled by unprecedented interagency data sharing, is doing exactly what it needs to do. It's restoring program integrity and actually clawing back stolen funds.
I have to push back pretty hard on that framing. What you see as a, quote, correction looks to me like a blunt, reactive instrument meant to mask some pretty catastrophic failures.
How so?
Well, they're deploying these massive dragnets to cover the fact that they relied on deeply flawed, undocumented machine learning. They simply refused to finalize reviews for tens of thousands of clearly flagged loans. But look at the sheer scale and coordination of what is happening right now. We aren't just sending strongly worded letters anymore. We have the White House task force to eliminate fraud, the DOJ, and the FBI literally putting people on the most wanted fraudsters list.
Sure, the optics are very dramatic.
It's not just optics, though. In Ohio alone, they dismantled a $30 million behavioral health scheme. They are seizing luxury cars, and they cross-designated prosecutors so state and federal teams like the Ohio Medicaid Fraud Control Unit can work together seamlessly. To me, this shows the system is actually working.
I feel like that's a very generous interpretation of a scramble.
That's an interesting point, though. I would definitely frame it differently. Think of the 2020 economic collapse like a mass casualty event.
Okay.
The economy was bleeding out. The SBA had something like 15 days to write the regulations and 10 days to get the money out the door. You have to stop the bleeding first and then audit the paperwork later. Isn't this massive enforcement wave exactly what a successful post-triage audit looks like?
It sounds great in a press release, I guess, but the underlying mechanics of that audit are a disaster. You can't really call triage successful if you stop treating the patients halfway through.
What do you mean by halfway through?
Consider the report from the OIG, the Office of Inspector General, the internal watchdog. They found nearly 38,000 Paycheck Protection Program loans worth about $4.6 billion that were flagged with what they called Hold Code 70.
Right, the code for suspected fraud.
Exactly. And that code essentially means stop, do not forgive this loan, we need to investigate. But the SBA never finished steps 3 and 4 of their own review process. They just left them sitting in administrative limbo.
Wow.
Yeah. And even worse, they blindly handed over 500,000 borrowers to the Treasury for collection just because the review process was completely broken. That isn't targeted justice. It's a frantic scramble.
Okay, well, I'll admit the internal review pipeline got completely overwhelmed early on. Leaving billions in flagged loans hanging in limbo is definitely a terrible look. But you have to look at how they are bridging that gap today. The technology and the data networks they are using right now are...
Wait, but the technology is exactly what caused the gap in the first place.
How do you figure?
Look at what the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, found. The SBA used a machine learning tool to screen these applications. But instead of letting the AI learn and find new suspicious patterns, which is literally the entire point of machine learning, they restricted it to only look for existing known flags.
Right.
Sophisticated fraud rings figured this out instantly and slipped right past the algorithm. And worse, the SBA hid this. They legally have to report their AI use cases, but they told the GAO they didn't have any.
Yeah, that was a huge oversight.
Because of this garbage in, garbage out data system, 2 million out of 3 million fraud referrals were completely unactionable. It was just a mess of duplicates and missing information.
I mean, I can't defend the AI rollout of 2020. Restricting a machine learning tool to static flags basically defeats the purpose, and failing to document it is a massive administrative failure. However, we're talking about the current crackdown here.
Right, but you can't separate the two.
Well, I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're focusing on the software of 2020 rather than the data networks of today. They have shifted from relying on a black box algorithm to utilizing hard, verified interagency data networks.
Like what, specifically?
Like the Healthcare Fraud Data Fusion Center. They are partnering with the Ohio Secretary of State to map out corporate shell companies using actual real registry data. We just saw them cross-reference SBA data with the Department of Labor and uncover $1.3 billion in overlapping fraud. That kind of interagency matching isn't a black box. It is definitive proof.
It might be definitive for some, sure, but what about the collateral damage? Let's go back to those 27,000 suspended borrowers in Ohio. This blunt data matching puts the entire burden of proof on the borrower.
It does place a heavy burden, yes.
Imagine you are a legitimate small manufacturer. Suddenly an algorithm flags you, and you are locked out of federal contracts, like the 8A program for disadvantaged businesses, while you're forced into a 45-day appeal process with the Office of Hearings and Appeals.
Right.
You could literally lose your business while you wait to clear your name. Meanwhile, the SBA took over 26,000 clearly ineligible loans worth nearly $500 million and just wrote them off.
You're talking about the de minimis threshold.
Exactly. They applied a $25,000 de minimis threshold. They are literally letting thousands of actual small-scale fraudsters off the hook, but crushing potentially legitimate businesses with an automated suspension dragnet.
I understand how brutal that sounds for a legitimate business caught in the middle. I really do. But this comes down to the harsh reality of resource allocation. Pursuing a $25,000 fraudulent loan honestly costs the agency more in legal and administrative fees than they would ever recover.
So they just get a free pass?
They have to point their heavy artillery at the massive, sophisticated rings. There was an international romance scam run out of Ghana using AI-generated video platforms to steal $15 million from seniors, and they funneled it through pandemic loans.
Wait, an AI romance game in Ghana?
Yeah, taking down networks like that requires massive coordination and freezing assets incredibly fast. Swift suspensions are a blunt tool, yes, but they stop the bleeding of taxpayer dollars into major criminal syndicates. But when you zoom out, the flashy press conferences about luxury cars and massive data centers, they just can't hide the foundational rot. Billions of dollars written off, massive undocumented AI failures, and a chaotic pay-and-chase reality that just throws innocent business owners under the bus.
And while I definitely agree the initial lack of front-end controls, like, failing to do basic IP address or date of birth checks, created a historic crisis, this $1.1 billion crackdown shows a government finally figuring out how to enforce accountability using modern data integration. We definitely agree on how disastrous that initial lack of controls was, but I think we are going to remain split on whether this dragnet is a scalable, effective model or just a desperate attempt to patch a sinking ship.
Exactly. It's fascinating how a crisis strips away the bureaucracy and reveals the real mechanics of government infrastructure. The material we dug into really highlights the tension between moving fast in an emergency and protecting the public purse.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, when the next massive economic shock hits, we'll have a system ready to triage without losing control of the patient entirely. If you found this debate valuable, please like, subscribe, share, follow, and turn on notifications. It helps us continue bringing you content like this and ensures you never miss future releases.